You've been making beans on toast wrong your entire life and you didn't even know it. What looks like one of the simplest meals in Britain is actually one of the easiest to mess up. The wrong beans, the wrong heat, the wrong bread, small mistakes that completely ruin the dish without you realizing. In this video, we're breaking down the most common beans on toast mistakes people make every day and how to fix them properly so you never end up with soggy, flavourless beans again. 12. Using the wrong brand of beans. This one starts arguments, but the argument only exists because some people have not done the comparison properly. Briton sells dozens of branded and own-label baked beans. Most of them are not good enough for beans on toast. The reason is the sauce. Beans on toast lives or dies on the quality of the tomato sauce. It needs to be sweet enough to balance the savoury toast, thick enough to sit without running off, and flavourful enough to carry the whole dish. The haricot beans themselves contribute very little flavour. They are a vehicle for the sauce, which means the sauce is everything. Heinz has been the benchmark in Britain since 1901. That is not marketing. That is over a century of consistent production and a sauce formula that genuinely outperforms most alternatives when eaten on toast rather than sampled straight from the tin. The balance of tomatoes, sugar, and seasoning in Heinz beans produces a sauce that reduces properly when heated, clings to the beans without becoming gluey, and tastes like what beans on toast is supposed to taste like. YouGov data consistently ranks beans on toast as one of the 8 most popular dishes in the UK. The version most people are eating is made with Heinz. Own-label supermarket beans are noticeably thinner and blander. The sauce lacks sweetness and body. On toast, it runs immediately, soaks the bread, and leaves you with a flavourless puddle rather than a sauce. Branston beans have their advocates, and they are a legitimate second choice with a slightly different flavour profile that some people prefer. But if you are using value-range supermarket beans for beans on toast, you are not getting the dish at its best. This is not snobbery. It is the difference between the correct ingredient and a substitute. Use Heinz. There is also a practical reason beyond flavour. The Heinz sauce formula is designed to behave predictably when heated, and it reduces at a consistent rate, thickens to a consistent finish, and clings to beans in a way that other brands, particularly own-label versions with higher water content, simply do not replicate. When you substitute a cheaper bean with a thinner sauce, you are not just getting a different flavour. You are getting a different cooking behaviour that requires different timing to manage. The dish becomes less reliable in addition to being less enjoyable. The 40 or 50 pence difference between a tin of Heinz and a supermarket own label is not the place to economise. 11. Boiling the beans. Every tin of Heinz baked beans carries the same instruction on the label that has been there for decades: do not boil. Most people boil them anyway, and either because they are in a hurry or because they simply are not paying attention to what is happening in the pan. When you boil baked beans, the sauce breaks down. The tomato-based sauce that should be glossy, slightly thick, and clingy becomes grainy and watery. The sugar in the sauce caramelizes unevenly, producing small dark specks and a slightly bitter edge that was not there before. The beans themselves take on a slightly mushy exterior rather than the soft but intact texture they should have. The entire character of the sauce changes, and not for the better. Heinz recommends heating the beans in a stainless steel pan for 3 to 4 minutes over a medium heat, stirring constantly. The target is a temperature of around 64 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to eat immediately without being so hot that the sauce degrades. And you will know you are at the right temperature when the beans are steaming and the sauce is moving in the pan, but there are no large bubbles breaking the surface. Medium heat, constant stirring, 3 to 4 minutes. Remove from the heat when the sauce just begins to show movement. That is it. The beans that come out of this process are a fundamentally different and better product than beans that have been boiled hard for 6 minutes because you turned the ring up and walked away to check your phone. There is a practical test for beans that have been boiled. Look at the sauce in the pan immediately after cooking. Properly heated beans produce a sauce that is glossy, fluid, and coats the back of a spoon in an even slightly thick layer. Boiled beans produce a sauce that looks dull. slightly separated. Tan leaves thin streaks on the spoon rather than an even coat. The texture of the beans themselves tells a similar story. Properly heated beans hold their shape and have a slight resistance when pressed with a spoon. Boiled beans partially collapse and the skin on some of them wrinkles or splits. You can taste the difference immediately, but you can see it just as clearly before the dish is assembled. 10. Not reducing the sauce enough. This is the opposite problem to boiling, and it catches a different category of home cook. People who know not to boil their beans sometimes underheat them so cautiously that the sauce never has a chance to concentrate properly. They warm the beans for 90 seconds, decide they are hot enough, and pour a thin, watery sauce straight onto the toast. When a tin of Heinz beans is opened, and the sauce is slightly thinner than the finished dish should be, 3 to 4 minutes of gentle heating on the hob does two things simultaneously. It brings the beans to the right eating temperature, and it allows some of the excess moisture in the sauce to evaporate, thickening it to the consistency that sits properly on toast without flooding the plate. The visual test for the right sauce consistency is straightforward. Drag a spoon across the bottom of the pan. If the channel it creates fills back in immediately and completely, the sauce is still too thin. If the channel holds for a second or two before slowly closing, the sauce is ready. If the channel holds almost indefinitely and the beans are barely moving in the pan, you have gone too far and the sauce is becoming sticky. So this 3-minute reduction is the single most practical improvement most people can make to their beans on toast. The dish goes from something that makes the toast soggy within 30 seconds to something where the toast and beans hold their respective textures through the entire eating experience. 9. Using the wrong bread. Beans on toast requires bread that can do a structural job. The beans are wet, the sauce is warm, and the moment they meet the toast, moisture transfer begins. The bread has to resist that moisture long enough for the dish to be eaten properly. Most people use whatever bread is in the cupboard without considering whether it is suited to the task. Thin sliced white sandwich bread is the wrong choice. It is designed for sandwiches, where it is compressed and protected by fillings. On its own, as toast, it has very little structural depth. It goes from crispy to soggy in under a minute once beans are applied. You end up eating a mush of beans and collapsed bread rather than the crispy base and saucy topping that makes beans on toast satisfying. The correct choice is thick-cut white bread, specifically a farmhouse-style loaf. Heinz itself specifies white farmhouse bread in their official preparation guide. The thickness gives the toast sufficient body to resist the sauce for long enough to eat the dish at a reasonable pace. The soft, open crumb of a good farmhouse loaf toasts with a slightly chewy interior and a properly crisped exterior that holds up under the weight and moisture of the beans. Sourdough works extremely well and is arguably the superior choice for flavour. Now, the slight sourness of a good sourdough cuts through the sweetness of the tomato sauce in a way that plain white bread cannot. The crust of a sourdough loaf is particularly robust. If you have access to a proper bakery loaf rather than supermarket bread, use it. What you should not use: thin white sandwich slices, any bread marketed as soft and fluffy, or any bread that compresses significantly when you press it with a finger. That compression tells you the bread lacks the structural density to survive contact with hot beans. There is also the question of toast colour. Thick-cut farmhouse bread needs to go darker than most people would instinctively choose. The thickness of the slice means the interior stays soft and slightly moist, even when the surface is deep golden brown. That deep colour on the surface is exactly what you want, and because the caramelization of the bread sugars at that temperature creates a flavour that works with the sweetness of the bean sauce, rather than just providing a neutral base. Pale toast on thick bread means the surface is barely crisp, and the interior is still essentially soft bread. It will not survive contact with hot beans for more than 30 seconds. Toast the bread until it is genuinely golden, not just warmed through. 8. Getting the butter wrong. Butter on beans on toast is not optional. This is a point on which the preparation of this dish is frequently misunderstood, usually by people who look at the finished plate and assume the butter is a minor detail. It is not a minor detail. It is what prevents the toast from becoming soggy and what gives the dish its characteristic richness. When you spread butter on hot toast, it melts into the surface layer of the bread. This creates a temporary moisture barrier between the toast and the beans. Without that barrier, the sauce from the beans soaks directly into the bread immediately, and the toast begins losing its crispness within seconds. With that barrier, the toast retains its texture significantly longer, and every mouthful delivers the contrast between crunchy toast and soft beans that the dish is built around. The butter should be unsalted, as Heinz's own guidance specifies. Salted butter adds an additional salt layer to a dish that already contains considerable salt from the beans. The result is a dish that tastes too salty and in which the sweetness of the tomato sauce is suppressed rather than complemented. Unsalted butter allows the flavors already in the dish to be the flavors you taste. Now, the butter should be spread generously, going right to the edges of the toast. Bare patches of unbuttered toast go soggy almost immediately. The entire surface needs coverage, and the butter should go onto the toast within 30 seconds of it coming out of the toaster, while the bread is still hot enough to melt it and allow it to be absorbed into the surface layer rather than sitting on top. 7. Drowning the toast in beans. More is not better. This is one of the most consistent errors in British beans on toast preparation, and it produces a dish that is unpleasant to eat regardless of how well everything else has been done. Beans piled high enough to slide off the sides, sauce pooling around the base of the toast, bread collapsing under the weight and moisture of an excessive quantity of beans. It looks generous. It eats badly. Heinz's etiquette guidance is direct on this point. Their phrase is, "Do not drown your toast." This is not fussiness. It is recognition of the fundamental ratio that makes the dish work. Beans on toast is a toast dish with beans on top, not a beans dish that happens to have some toast underneath. The toast needs to remain present as a structural and textural element throughout the eating experience. That only happens if the quantity of beans allows the toast to retain its integrity. For 2 slices of thick-cut toast, 1 standard 400-gram tin of beans is the correct amount. That is 200 grams of beans per slice. Spread evenly, this gives a layer of beans that covers the toast without piling up, and a quantity of sauce that moistens the surface without flooding it. The toast should still be visible at the edges. The beans should sit on the toast, not swim across the plate. If you are using a smaller tin, or if you are making beans on toast for 1 and using half a tin, resist the urge to compensate by adding more from another tin. Half a tin per slice is correct. Eat the extra beans separately if you are hungry, or put them in a pot in the fridge for tomorrow. 6. Adding too much extra seasoning. Heinz baked beans already contain salt, sugar, tomatoes, modified corn flour, and spice extract. They are a complete, balanced, ready-to-eat product that has been formulated over decades to taste the way it tastes. When you start adding Worcestershire sauce, chili flakes, grated cheese, smoked paprika, black pepper, and a dash of hot sauce before you have even tasted the dish, you are not improving it. You are competing with it. This mistake is most common among people who have learned to cook properly in other contexts and cannot resist the instinct to season and develop flavor at every stage. That instinct is correct in most cooking. In beans on toast, the instinct needs to be checked because the beans are not a blank canvas. They are a finished sauce that has already been seasoned. The approach that works is to heat the beans, assemble the dish, taste one mouthful, and then decide if anything is needed. Most of the time, nothing is needed. The sweetness of the sauce, the saltiness of the beans, and the richness of the butter on the toast deliver a complete flavor profile. If, after tasting, you want a little black pepper, add a little black pepper. If you want Worcestershire sauce, a few dashes are legitimate and work well with the tomato base. Now, a small amount of mature cheddar melted on top is a genuine upgrade that most Brits consider standard. What does not work is adding everything at once before tasting. It overwhelms the clean, simple flavour that makes beans on toast the comfort food it is. 5. Microwaving the beans. The microwave is a legitimate cooking tool for many things. Beans on toast is not one of them, and using it instead of the hob produces an inferior result in virtually every instance. When you microwave baked beans, the heat is not evenly distributed. Microwaves heat food by causing water molecules to vibrate, and they do this erratically in a sauce-heavy product like baked beans. The result is beans that are too hot in some areas and still cool in others, with a sauce that has separated slightly and become thin and watery in spots. The beans lose some of the textural integrity that makes them satisfying to eat, and the sauce is never quite the right consistency. More practically, you cannot control what is happening in a microwave the way you can control what is happening in a pan. The 3 to 4 minutes of gentle stirring on the hob that brings beans to the right temperature and reduces the sauce to the right consistency is not replicable in a microwave. You are guessing at intervals and hoping for a result rather than actively producing one. The hob method takes 4 minutes. The microwave method also takes roughly 4 minutes once you account for stirring intervals and the standing time you need afterwards to let the temperature equalize. There is no time saving. There is only a quality reduction. Use the hob. 4. Not shaking the tin. This is a small detail that most people have never heard of, and it makes a genuine practical difference to the dish. Heinz includes it in their official preparation instructions, and it has a straightforward rationale that makes complete sense once you understand it. A tin of baked beans, after sitting on a shelf for any length of time, naturally separates. The heavier beans settle toward the bottom and the sauce rises toward the top. When you open the tin without shaking it, you pour out an uneven distribution of beans and sauce. The first portion contains disproportionately more sauce. The last portion contains disproportionately more beans. Neither portion represents the product at its correct ratio. Heinz recommends storing the tin upside down and shaking it for 5 seconds before opening. Storing upside down means the separation reverses overnight, with beans toward what will become the opening end when you flip it back. Shaking redistributes the contents. The result is that when you open the tin and pour the beans into the pan, you get an even distribution of beans and sauce from the first pour. This is not a dramatic improvement. It is a small, correct detail in the preparation of a simple dish. The philosophy behind it is the same philosophy that produces consistently good food at every level of complexity. You attend to the details that are easy to attend to because they add up. 3. Assembling the dish in the wrong order. The correct sequence for making beans on toast is heat the beans, toast the bread, butter the toast, pour the beans. Most people do it in this order without thinking about it, and some people do it in a different order without realizing the sequence matters. It does. The most common sequencing error is toasting the bread first and then heating the beans. By the time the beans are ready, the toast has been sitting on the plate for 4 minutes, cooling down and losing its crispness. The butter, if applied immediately after toasting, has already solidified. The moisture barrier it creates is less effective on cooling toast than on hot toast. The dish is assembled with toast that is already on its way to becoming stale, rather than toast at its peak. The correct approach is to start the beans on the hob first. Once the beans are in the pan and heating, put the bread in the toaster. Time it so that the toast finishes at roughly the same moment the beans are ready. Butter the toast immediately. Pour the beans immediately. Eat immediately. The entire assembly from butter to first mouthful should take under 30 seconds. Beans on toast is a dish designed to be eaten the moment it is made. Every minute between assembly and eating is a minute of quality degradation. The toast is getting soggier. The beans are cooling. The butter barrier is losing its effectiveness. The only way to eat beans on toast properly is to eat it while it is hot, and the only way to eat it while it is hot is to time the components so they finish simultaneously. 2. Using the wrong pan. Heinz specifies that beans should be heated in a stainless steel pan. This recommendation exists for a reason that most people would not think to consider: the reactivity of certain metals with acidic foods. Baked beans in tomato sauce are acidic. Tomatoes are acidic. When an acidic sauce is heated in a reactive metal pan, such as aluminium or low-quality non-stick, a small amount of the metal can leach into the food. The quantities involved are not a significant health concern, but they affect flavor. Beans heated in a reactive pan have a slightly metallic, flat taste that is noticeably different from beans heated in stainless steel. The second reason to use stainless steel is heat distribution. A quality stainless steel pan distributes heat evenly across the base, which allows the beans to heat uniformly without hot spots that burn the sauce at the bottom while the beans in the middle are still cold. Non-stick pans, particularly cheap ones, often have thinner bases with less consistent heat distribution. This does not mean you need expensive equipment. The basic stainless steel saucepan costs very little and lasts for decades. If you currently heat beans in a non-stick pan and the bottom catches regularly or the sauce has a slightly off flavour, switching to stainless steel will produce a noticeable improvement. Clean the pan thoroughly between uses. Residual burnt sauce from a previous cook affects the flavour of the next batch of beans more than most people realise. 1. Eating it too late. Beans on toast is a dish that has a window of about 4 minutes between being perfect and being disappointing. Most people do not eat it within that window. They make it, carry it to the sofa or the table, do something else for 2 or 3 minutes, and sit down to a plate where the toast has gone soft and the beans have formed a skin. Mind, the skin is the most visible symptom of beans on toast that has been left too long. When hot-baked beans are exposed to air, the surface of the sauce begins to dry and form a thin film. This film is not harmful, it is simply the sauce beginning to set as it cools, but it changes the texture of the beans significantly, making the top layer thick and slightly rubbery rather than glossy and fluid. Stirring breaks the skin but does not fully restore the sauce to its original consistency. The toast, meanwhile, is absorbing moisture from the sauce and from the ambient humidity of the warm beans above it. What was crispy is becoming soft. What was the textural contrast that made the dish satisfying is disappearing by the minute. The butter barrier slows this process but doesn't stop it. And the solution is simply to eat the dish the moment it is assembled. Not in 2 minutes. Not after you have poured a drink or checked your messages. The moment it hits the plate, you sit down and you eat it. It is a dish that rewards the 4 minutes of attention it asks for with a genuinely excellent result, and punishes distraction with a plate of soggy bread and congealed beans. Now you know the mistakes here is the correct method in full. Buy Heinz, not the value range. Heinz. Store the tin upside down and shake it for 5 seconds before opening. Place a stainless steel saucepan on medium heat. Pour in the beans. Stir constantly for 3 to 4 minutes. Do not boil. Watch the sauce. When it thickens just enough to hold a channel briefly when you drag a spoon through it, it is ready. While the beans are heating, put 2 thick slices of farmhouse white bread in the toaster. Time it so they finish together. Remove the toast immediately, spread unsalted butter generously across the entire surface, including the edges, and place on the plate. Pour the beans directly over the toast. 1 tin between 2 slices. Do not overload. Eat within 2 minutes of assembling. That is beans on toast done properly. It takes 5 minutes, costs very little, and tastes like the best version of the thing you have been eating your whole life. Most people have never had it done properly. Now you can. Comment below with which mistake you have been making. The boiling one is by far the most common, and the timing one is the one nobody thinks about until they read it. Since share this with anyone whose beans on toast have ever gone cold on them before they finished it. Subscribe for more practical cooking fixes that make everyday food genuinely better. See you next time.